Charles Leclerc crossed the finish line in Miami, believing he had secured 6th place for Ferrari. The team celebrated, the points were banked, or so they thought. Hours later, the FIA erased that result with a penalty of 20 seconds applied after the race. No warning during the event. No chance to respond in real time. Just a final classification rewritten in silence and a message sent to every garage on the grid. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. The penalty came from 3 track limit violations on the final lap, corners where Leclerc gained an estimated advantage of 0.12 seconds, according to FIA sensor data. That tiny margin triggered the harshest available punishment. Ferrari's SF24 has shown rear instability in low grip conditions, a setup compromise that pushes drivers closer to the edge. And that is where this story gets complicated, because if the car itself forces these decisions, the penalty exposes something deeper than one driver's mistake. The FIA's decision in Miami sets a precedent that could reshape how the rest of the season unfolds. Every driver now faces the same uncertainty. How far can they push before the rules catch up? Ferrari's internal calculations held a figure they never released, and that number changes the entire conversation. The next section reveals what engineers in the garage already knew. The FIA sensors tracked Leclerc exceeding limits at turns 14, 15 and 17 on lap 57, margins measured in centimetres. The internal threshold for material advantage is 0.10 seconds. Leclerc crossed it, but the data reveals more. His rear tyres were at 87% degradation. The SF24 prioritised straight-line speed over stability, causing slides under acceleration. Post-race penalties offer no chance to correct, and that is where this story gets complicated. Ferrari's telemetry showed Leclerc stayed within limits at turn 16. That clean corner could support an appeal, but highlights the razor-thin margin drivers now face. The next section breaks down the numbers that truly matter. Leclerc lost 4 points in Miami. The drop from 6th to 8th represents a 33% swing in Ferrari's deficit to McLaren. Every point matters now. This penalty altered the championship landscape. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Leclerc sits 5th, 18 points behind Verstappen. If similar penalties occur twice more, Ferrari could lose 12 additional points versus cleaner rivals. Ferrari has received more post-race penalties than Red Bull recently, and that is where this story gets complicated. Lost points reduce Ferrari's strategic flexibility. They cannot afford DNFs when every position carries weight. Midfield teams watch closely. The next section reveals Maranello's internal debate. Vasseur said Ferrari respects the decision. Inside the garage, engineers debated a different path. Adapt driving style or develop the SF24 for more margin. Every choice carries a cost. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Ferrari Simulator now includes limit awareness scenarios. Barcelona upgrades may improve rear traction. If Leclerc lifts early, he loses 0.3 seconds per lap, more than the penalty risk. And that is where this story gets complicated. Ferrari explores a technical directive request to clarify advantage calculation. This could reshape enforcement, but it risks political friction when clarity matters most. The next section reveals how pressure changes a driver's mind. Leclerc's style relies on late braking and tight apexes. After Miami, those instincts carry a hidden cost. Every corner under pressure brings doubt. That hesitation is where championships slip. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. After penalties, drivers adopt 12% more conservative lines. Reaction time slow by 0.2 seconds under pressure. Hamilton's caution in 2021 cost 0.4 seconds per lap. And that is where this story gets complicated. Team radio shows engineers now say manage limits instead of push now. That subtle shift alters split-second decisions. When does caution become costlier than penalty risk? The next section reveals how rivals exploit that uncertainty. Verstappen does not need to overtake Leclerc, he just needs to stay close. Drivers under pressure exceed limits 3.2 times more often. Red Bull avoids these situations. Ferrari often defends with no margin. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Norris and Piastri use pressure to force defensive moves that test limits. Russell stays within 1.5 seconds to raise penalty probability by 40%. This is about forcing doubt, not raw speed, and that is where this story gets complicated. Older tyres mean more sliding and more limit incidents. Rivals can force Ferrari into strategies that amplify this risk. Precision racing wins when rules are this strict. The next section brings the voices warning about this shift. Vasseur called for clarity on advantage calculation. Horner emphasized consistency. Brundle said the FIA sends a message about competition beyond one penalty. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. The unpublished number is 0.10 seconds. That is the FIA's threshold for material advantage. Leclerc's 0.12 seconds crossed it by the slimmest margin. Directive 042 to 24 increased scrutiny on marginal cases. And that is where this story gets complicated. Ferrari's appeal hinges on proving advantage below 0.10 seconds, a technical debate rooted in data. The conversation shifts from Miami to what comes next. The next section projects how enforcement shapes Ferrari's season. Leclerc and Ferrari face 5 races with a new reality. Strict enforcement could bring 2 or 3 more penalty risks before summer. Monaco and Barcelona will test their adaptation. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Ferrari has 3 weeks to adjust protocols and refine the SF24. Mastering compliance could turn precision into advantage. But accumulated penalties could create a decisive 15-point deficit. Resilience has limits under repeated pressure. And that is where this story gets complicated. The real consequence is not 2 positions lost. It is certainty that every meter matters now. Every decision is measured against a standard with no room for error. In Formula One, margins are everything. After Miami, Ferrari learned the margin for error is now 0.